Hello, crafty friends. This is Jen, and thank you for joining me today. Today, I'm going to show you how to use Spellbinders Stitched Card Front Border and Flower die set. This beautiful die set comes with everything you need to make this beautiful flowered, embroideried card front. It also has separate dies to cut edges, to make a border, to add flowers with leaves, and we're going to do all four today. So I'm going to start by, I die cut the background from heavyweight cardstock, 110-pound cardstock, and I'm starting to do my embroidery. For this, I used just embroidery thread, and I used 3 strands. If I did it again, I would definitely use 4 strands just to make it thicker. And when you start, you want to tape the embroidery thread on the back. And I'm just going through and stitching the embroidery thread through. And I like to start from the top holes and go to the middle hole at the bottom to create the flower petal. And I'm just showing you a quick how I stitched it. I'm not going to stitch the whole background for you because that would be a very long video. But this has been actually a really relaxing way to make cards. I threw a movie on, I put my feet up, and I embroidered in all different colors. And the nice part is you can pick whatever colors you want. It doesn't have to be anything specific. But for this background, I just did stitching. I didn't do stitching like around the outside. I will do that in the next card that I'm going to show you. So this card, I just went with some pretty pinks, some yellows, and I did 3 different colored pink embroidery thread, like a dark, a medium, and a light. And then a yellow for the tiny little buds that are around the card. I went through my stash and I was trying to figure out what can I do that I haven't done in a long time. And I don't know if I had ever even used this die set. At one point I had joined the Dies of the Month Club, and I got this stitch die, and I loved it, but I don't think I ever had used it. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to get this out. I went up to my local Michael's store, got some embroidery thread, and just went to town stitching. Now I've just sped the video up here, but as you can see, I am knotting it at the back, but when I first start, I do tape it down. So now we're going in with green. And I just picked a regular green color and went around with the leaves. And now I'm going in with a medium pink. And I'm just showing how I stitched the next flower. And like I said, I just sped this up just to show you this little bit. Now we're moving on to the next flowers. These are separate flowers that come with the die set, and it's 2 flowers and 2 flowers. I'm sorry. Actually, let me correct that. It's 1 flower and 2 leaves, and I die cut them twice. And I die cut 4 leaves, and I decided to use a red color for these flowers. So I went in with my red thread, and you can see the finished flower off to the side there. And now I'm doing the leaves, which I went in with 3 different strands of green. I went with a sparkly, and I went in with a dark and a light green. I thought that would be kind of a neat variegated color. And you can do that too. You just take 1 strand of a color and another strand of a color, and you can make them variegated. I know there's some very fancy sparkly embroidery thread that you can get. It's a little more money than regular embroidery thread, but it does last. And I'm just showing how I did the leaves there. And like I said, I like to go from the outside to the inside. I found that it made a much nicer pattern on the flowers and the leaves, and so that's how I did that. And then I just knot it at the back and trim off the extra. So now I'm moving on to the next background. I did do 2 full-size backgrounds. This one I did in all kinds of different colors. And this is the background that I also stitched around the outside of the petals, the leaves, and the inside of the flowers, the little small flowers. I did an outside stitch on all of them, where I didn't do that on the first one. And I just did this to show you that there's 2 different ways that you can do it, and you can go with whichever way that you like best. That's the nice part about these dies, is that it's all up to you what you want to do. So what I've done here is just taken a little bit of Scotch tape, and I've just cut it or pulled it apart and made it smaller so that it would fit into the back. And it does kind of go over some of the holes, but you stitch right through that and it's not a big deal. Sometimes I did have to trim off some additional, like some extra tape that hung off the sides. Sorry for my wobbly camera there for a second. And again, I'm just going from the outside to the inside. So now we're going to move on to my next card. For this one, I used the border die set that came with the stitched die set from Spellbinders, and I made 2 borders on the top and the bottom, and I used the corresponding edge die to cut the edge off of these cards. And I'm just using a light blue, a dark blue, a light yellow, and a dark yellow to create the flowers on this card. Okay, so now we're going to start putting these cards together. So here's my finished background, and this is the one with the multicolors and the border around all of the petals and leaves. So for this, I decided to use Spellbinders Glimmer Let Your Sentiment Shine hot foil set. And I really do love using the Glimmer machine. It just adds that little bit extra to your cards. Once it goes through, though, I do like to go through with a sand eraser and just clean up the edges, because sometimes you do get a little bit of extra foil on your cards. So that's what I'm doing here, is just going through with the sand eraser and cleaning up those edges. And to adhere the card, I'm using thin strips of double-sided foam tape. And I've also added little bits to the inside as well. Okay, so we have our background, our flowered area on, and I'm just going to add a little bit of bling to my card. So I have these really neat little sequence bits that I have, and they're kind of like a iridescent holographic color. I'm just adding a few drops of glue and then adding those onto my card, and then I'll just set that aside to let it dry. And this just adds a little bit of extra sparkle to the card. Next, I'm going to add some gold dots to the card. These are also from Spellbinders, and they're these pretty gold dots. There's a few little spots on the card that you don't stitch, so I'm just adding some gold accessory to that. So here's my finished and stitched background for this card. For this one, I decided to go with Snarky Happy Birthday Hot Glimmer die set, again from Spellbinders. And I used this beautiful royal blue or dark blue cardstock. I die cut a piece of light blue sparkly cardstock that I had on hand. It was just a piece of scrap. And I used the edge dies that came with the stitched die set and created a top and bottom border that fits with my stitched background. And I'm just showing you here that, you know, my happy birthday is going to go onto the front. And I put gold foil onto the same dark blue cardstock that I had for the background, or for the card base of this card. Just making sure it's center, and then pressing that down, and then using another stamping block to hold that down. So now everything's all dry. I'm going to use double-sided foam tape onto the background of my stitched part. Now I'm not putting any foam tape onto the embroidery part. I'm just going to let that sit as is. But I am going to make sure that I bulk up the center. And this is just some foam tape that I ordered from Simon Says Stamps. And I'm just making sure that that's straight, and then pressing that down. Now the next step is I'm going to add some of these little gold dots to the front of my card, but I'm also going to add some small dots to all the flower centers of my card. I felt like it needed a little something extra. So I'm just adding a little dab of glue to the center of each flower, and then I'm going to add my little gold dot. Or gold bling, however you want to call it. I just feel like this just added a little something extra to my card. And if you know embroidery, you could really do like a stitch knot in the center of the flowers. You could add a different colored bling. You could add just about anything to these. And I realized here that I needed that small one, so I'm going to replace it with a different sized dot eventually. There we go. And now I have enough to do all the centers of the flowers. And there we go. So we're moving on now to our next card. And this card I made a sympathy card. I went around the edges with a red distress ink. I think it was brick red. And I did an embossed background, and I just dug out one of my old embossing folders from my Cuttlebug. There's an old one. And I'm just taping this on using double-sided adhesive. And I'm going to put the background on, and then we're going to add the With Sympathy. And that With Sympathy comes from the Spellbinders Glimmer Elegant Occasion Sentiments. And it uses, I just used some gold foil and onto white heavyweight cardstock to create that one. For my last card, I went with a pink background or pink card base from an 80-pound cardstock. And I used a white sparkly cardstock background to go with that. And I'm just putting this all together. And I also used another sentiment from the Elegant Occasions Sentiment Hot Glimmer stamp set. And here we have our 4 finished cards, each different, but each beautiful. And I highly recommend trying out these stitch dies from Spellbinders. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have a great day and see you next time.